Welcome to Be Wise PoliSports Podcast. This is Controlling Interest, PoliSports Tea Leaves. I'm your host, Political Lil. And today we're steeped in something delicate because power is shifting, not quietly, not slowly, but economically, visibly, culturally. Women's sports, and particularly women's basketball, are not just growing, they're exploding. Endorsements are multiplying. Ownership models are evolving. NIL money has rewritten leverage. And for the first time at scale, we are watching black female athletes become not just stars, but economic anchors, franchises, brand, power centers. And that brings us to the question that may define this era. What happens psychologically and relationally when traditional power structures shift and women ascend faster, higher, and more visible than their partners? Because something is happening. We've recently seen the high-profile breakup involving Rickea Jackson and James Pierce Jr. dominating the headlines. Around the same time, another NFL tragedy involving domestic violence shook the sports world. Now let me be clear, we're not assigning motives. We are not speculating on private dynamics. And we are not reducing complex situations to simple narratives. What we are doing is examining patterns. Because across the landscape of elite sports, a new archetype is emerging. The sports power couple. Not the model and the athlete, not the entertainer and the quarterback, but athlete and athlete, brand and brand, leverage and leverage. And in some cases, she is the bigger brand. And she has the strong endorsement portfolio. She has the louder fan base. She has the hotter cultural moment. So here's the hook for today's tea leaves. Are we entering a new era where women athletic power is changing relationship dynamics? Because in a society that has long conditioned masculinity around dominance, provision, and visibility, what happens when visibility is shared? Or when it tilts? When she becomes the franchise? What happens to identity? What happens to ego? What happens to love? Professional jealousy exists in every high-performance industry. Law, medicine, entertainment, politics. Sports are no different. But sports magnifies everything. Contracts are public. Rankings are public. Endorsements are public. Social media comparisons are relentless. And for black women whose margin for public error has historically been thinner, the stakes are even higher. Because brand equity is fragile. Morality clauses are real. Narratives move faster than truth. So this isn't just about relationships. It's about leverage. It's about psychology. It's about economics. It's about identity in an era of ascension. This episode begins a 5-part Tea Leaves series exploring the rise of the sports power couple, the psychology of professional jealousy, the economic inversion of traditional gender roles in athletics, the brand risks of domestic turmoil, and whether we are culturally prepared to share power at home. Because power is shifted on the court, the question is, can our relationships evolve with it? Let's steep the tea. Over the past several weeks, headlines in the sports world have felt heavier than usual. Not because of playoffs, not because of contracts, but because of relationships unraveling in public view. One of the most talked about situations involved Rickea Jackson and James Pierce Jr., a high-profile couple navigating the pressures of elite athletics and rising visibility. Reports confirm a breakup and allegations that quickly became part of the public conversation. As with many modern sports stories, social media accelerated speculation long before clarity could catch up. Around the same time, in a completely separate incident, an NFL player was involved in a tragic domestic violence case that resulted in the loss of a woman's life. The details are still emerging publicly, and out of respect for the gravity of the situation, we will not reduce it to commentary or conjecture. But let me say this clearly. We are not assigning motives. We are not speculating about private dynamics. We are examining patterns. Because when two high-performing athletes are involved, when brand equity, contracts, endorsement deals, and millions of eyes are attacked, relationships are no longer just personal. They exist inside a marketplace, inside a cultural moment, inside a shifting power structure. And that brings us to the question at the center of this Tea Leaves episode. Are we entering an era where women athletic ascension is changing relationship dynamics? Because something is shifting, economically, culturally, and psychologically. Women basketball is expanding at an unprecedented rate. Visibility is rising. NIL has changed leverage. Brand deals are multiplying. And for the first time at scale, we are watching female athletes, particularly black female athletes, become not just contributors to the sport economically, but drivers of it. When that kind of power rises quickly, it doesn't just alter contracts. It alters identity, it alters perception, it alters relational expectations. So before we draw conclusions, before we point fingers, before narratives harden into assumptions, let's slow down. Let's steep the tea. Because what we may be witnessing isn't isolated chaos. It may be the early signs of a structural shift, one that forces us to consider how love, leverage, ego, and ascension coexist in an era of the sports power couple. To understand the tension, we have to understand the terrain. Women's basketball is not simply having a moment, it's undergoing an economic expansion. Attendance is rising, broadcast deals are growing, social media engagement is surging. Corporate sponsors are recalibrating their marketing strategies around women athletes who command both cultural influence and consumer loyalty. The introduction of NIL, name, image, and likeness, fundamentally changed the leverage equation. College athletes are no longer waiting until draft night to monetize their brand. They are building media platforms, securing endorsements, launching merchandising, and cultivating direct relationship with fans while still in school. That shift alone has accelerated visibility in ways we've never seen before. And then there's ownership. We are watching athletes move beyond endorsement checks into equity conversations, player-led leagues, investment groups, strategic partnerships. Agency is no longer symbolic, it is structural. Women athletes are negotiating differently, branding differently, and in some cases outpacing their male counterparts in cultural resonance. Look at the influence of Angel Reese, whose brand presence extends far beyond the hardwood, or Asia Wilson, a champion whose marketability and leadership have positioned her as both franchise player and corporate ambassador, or Nafia Collier, who has stepped into ownership conversation and business strategy with a level of foresight that signals long-term power, not temporary visibility. For the first time at scale, we are seeing something historically rare in sports culture. She may be the bigger brand. She may have more endorsement leverage. She may command stronger public favor and narrative momentum. That reality does not diminish male athletic achievement, but it does alter the psychological landscape inside relationships where both partners are operating in elite performance spaces. Because traditionally, male athletes were assumed to be the primary economic engine, the public centerpiece. Now that assumption is no longer guaranteed. And when visibility rises faster than tradition evolves, pressures form. Not necessarily conflict, not automatic automatically instability, but pressure, the kind that tests identity, expectations, and unspoken beliefs about who leads, who provides, and who carries the cultural spotlight. The power shift is not hypothetical, it's measurable. The question is whether our relationship framework have evolved at the same speed as the market. Now we move from structure to psychology, because behind contracts and endorsements is something far more fragile: identity. Elite athletes do not just play sports, they become it. Their sense of worth, relevance, and status is often deeply intertwined with performance, ranking, and public affirmation. When you live inside a high-performance ecosystem, success is not just celebrated, it becomes the foundation of self-concept. And this is where social comparison theory quietly enters the room. In every elite field, law, medicine, entertainment, business, professionals compare trajectories. Who is ascending faster? Who is earning more? Who is receiving more visibility? Who is positioned as the future? Professional jealousy exists in every elite field. Sports are no different. But sports adds amplification. Contracts are public. Endorsements are public. Awards are televised. Social media metrics are visible in real time. There is no private lane to recalibrate quietly. Comparison is constant and visibility is relentless. Layer onto that long-standing cultural conditioning around masculinity, particularly the idea that dominance, provision, and public leadership define manhood. When identity is tied to being the primary earner, the franchise player, or the visible centerpiece, a rapid shift in public leverage can feel destabilizing. Not because partnership is impossible, but because expectations were shaped in a different era. Now imagine a relationship where both partners are elite competitors. Both are ambitious. Both are publicly evaluated. But one partner's star begins to rise faster. The endorsements multiply. The cultural favor intensifies. The narrative positions her as the future of the league. What happens when one partner becomes the franchise? Status inversion, where traditional assumptions about who leads economically or culturally are flipped. And that can create internal friction even in a loving relationship. It doesn't automatically produce conflict, but it can surface insecurities that were never interrogated before. And when identity is tied to dominance, shared power can feel like displacement. This is not an accusation. It is a psychological reality observable across industry. The question isn't whether high-achieving couples can thrive, many do. The question is whether we are preparing athletes emotionally for the landscape where power is increasingly shared and sometimes visibly tilted. Because egos don't disappear at the altar, it travels with the contract. Now we have to talk about money. Because in modern sports, love does not exist outside of leverage. It exists inside of contract, endorsement, portfolio, media narratives, and corporate risk assessment. Every major sponsorship deal includes morality clauses. These clauses are not symbolic, they are enforceable. If an athlete becomes associated with behavior deemed damaging to a brand's image, contracts can be paused, renegotiated, or terminated. Corporations do not litigate emotions, they manage risk, and risk is not evaluated equally. When allegations of domestic violence surface, regardless of the legal outcome, the reputational ripples move fast. Headlines precede facts. Social media creates trial by narrative. Sponsors assess exposure. Agents make emergency calls. PR teams move into containment mode. For female athletes, particularly those whose brands are built on relatability, empowerment, and aspirational visibility, the stakes are layered. Even if they are not the accused party, association alone can trigger scrutiny. Silence can be misinterpreted. Public statements can be dissected. Emotional responses can be weaponized. And for Black women, the calculus is even more precarious. For Black women, the margin of public error is thinner and forgiveness is slower. History tells us that Black female athletes are often granted less softness in media framing, less benefit of the doubt, more scrutiny in tone, more aggressive character narration. When turbulence enters their personal lives, it doesn't just become gossip, it becomes branding, vulnerability. This is where the sports power couple dynamics become emotionally complex. If she is ascending, if she is becoming a cultural centerpiece, then any instability attached to her proximity becomes a potential liability, not morally, financially. Because in the age of her ascension, love is no longer a private matter, it's reputational. That is the part we rarely discuss openly. Relationships at this level are no longer insulated from market forces. They are absorbed by them. And when identity tensions meet brand fragility, the consequences expand far beyond the couple. They reach the contract. So now we step back, not to judge, not to speculate, but to ask the harder question. Are sports power couples emotionally prepared for this new era? Because the economics have evolved faster than the emotional infrastructure. Athletes today receive media training, financial advisors, brand strategists, performance coaches. But how often are they prepared for relational power shift? How often are they coached on what happens when one partner's visibility eclipses the other? Are agents educating their clients about relationship risk the same way they educate them about financial risk? When two elite competitors form a partnership, that union becomes more than romantic. It becomes reputational. It becomes strategic. It becomes economically intertwined. Yet we rarely discuss emotional literacy as part of professional development in athletics. We prepare players for contract negotiation. We don't always prepare them for ego negotiation. And then there's social media. Social media doesn't simply observe relationships, it ranks them. It compares them. It fuels commentary about who is up, who's falling off, who's the bigger star. It turns private dynamics into public scoreboard. In that environment, insecurity doesn't just whisper, it trends. So here's the real question for this moment. If she becomes the economic anchor, are we ready for cultural adjustment? Not just inside relationships, but inside our expectations, inside locker rooms, inside family systems, inside fan culture. Because maybe this isn't about individual instability. Maybe this is about transition, a shift from a historically male-centered sports economy to a shared and sometimes female-led one. And transitions create pressure points. The question is whether we treat those pressure points as warning signs or as opportunities to evolve. We spent this episode talking about power shifts, about endorsement flipping, about contracts outpacing tradition, and about the quiet tension that can build when she ascends. But let's be clear about something. When egos go unchecked, when insecurity goes untreated, when power becomes possession, that's when love stops being partnership and starts becoming control. And in sports culture, where dominance is trained, where winning is identity, where silence is often rewarded, unaddressed jealousy doesn't just bruise feelings. It can bruise bodies, it can bruise reputations, it can bruise entire legacies. Domestic violence does not begin with a punt. It begins with resentment, with isolation, with financial secrecy, with tone policing, with emotional intimidation disguised as competitiveness. And when two public figures are involved, the stakes multiply. Because now the relationship isn't just emotional, it's financial, it's political, it's brand equity. So what's the evolution? We normalize relationship counseling before crisis, financial transparency before suspicion, brand education before imbalance, emotional intelligence training in athletic programs, public relationship preparation for high-profile partnership. We teach young athletes that emotional strength is not weakness. We teach couples that shared power is not lost power. We teach men that her success is not your subtraction. And we teach women that ambition does not require apology. Because here's the truth. A power couple is not two people competing for the spotlight. It's two people expanding the stage. But if we refuse to evolve, if egos stay louder than empathy, then sports power couples become a headline instead of a legacy. So in the age of her ascension, the real flex isn't dominance, it's maturity, it's accountability, it's partnership. And if love can't evolve with power, then power will expose what love was never built to hold. Power is shifting on the court. The question is, can love evolve with it? Or, in the age of her ascension, ego can fracture or evolve. And maybe the real championship is learning which one to choose. And that's the tea leaves on controlling interest. Because in sports and in love, control always tells on itself. It shows up in contracts, in silence, in body language, in who speaks first and who gets interrupted. Nothing is random, nothing is accidental. Patterns repeat, power shift, and intention always leaves residue. This is PoliSports Tea Leaves. I'm your host, Political Lil. Until next time, stay observant, stay watchful, because the leaves don't lie. They always reveal the intent behind the pattern. And when you learn how to read them, you'll never be surprised by the outcome.